The Battle of New Orleans is probably the thing we know best about the War of 1812. But a lot happened in that war. The enemy burned this building, and this building, and captured Detroit. We burned York, Ontario, now known as Toronto. It was the first and last time a president rode to the sound of the guns. Our least popular war, and at the end of the day, a victory, or close enough. The War of 1812 came at the end of the wars of the French Revolution, a world war as violent as World Wars I and II, longer than both put together, and as ideological as the Cold War. By the early 1800s, the two main contestants were Britain and Napoleonic France. Both countries pressured and bullied the neutral United States, but Britain, as the world's greatest naval power and owner of nearby Canada, had more opportunities. In June 1812, President James Madison asked Congress to declare war on Britain. He gave three main reasons. The first was impressment. The British Navy conscripted sailors by seizing men on land and on British ships. If British sailors became American citizens, the British Navy would seize them on American ships. Madison called it violating the American flag on the great highway of nations. Madison's second reason was orders in council, British decrees forbidding America to trade with France. The orders in council did not constitute a blockade. Britain traded with France herself, but she wanted a monopoly, and she seized American ships that tried to horn in. Madison called it laying waste our neutral trade. The third reason was Indian warfare on the frontier. Tecumseh, a Shawnee leader in what is now Indiana, had built an Indian alliance from Alabama to Canada with British help. In 1811, Americans fought a battle with him on Tippecanoe Creek. Madison called this warfare renewed by the savages. Madison's party, the Republicans, had a majority in Congress, but the opposition Federalists were strong in the Northeast. They didn't care about sailors or Indians, and they wanted to keep trading with Britain. They hated the war and its supporters. Such blockheads, said Gouverneur Morris, are neither worthy of nor fit for a free government. Congress backed Madison, 74-49 in the House and 19-13 in the Senate, still the narrowest vote to declare war in American history. Never was America less ready to fight. Winfield Scott, our best general between Washington and Grant, described the officer corps at the beginning of the war as imbeciles and ignoramuses. The first year of fighting showed how right Scott was. American militia refused to cross the Niagara River into Canada, and the American commander in Detroit surrendered to an inferior British force. The only good news came from ship-to-ship duels at sea. Here, the frigate Constitution has blown the masts off the British frigate Guerriere. Such losses, said one member of Parliament, cost the British Navy the sacred spell of invincibility. In 1813, Madison regrouped. He and his Secretary of War, John Armstrong, promoted young officers and cleaned out dead wood. On Lake Ontario, Americans burned the village of York, though the whole theater was a standoff. On Lake Erie, however, 28-year-old Oliver Hazard Perry beat a British squadron and made a terse report. "We have met the enemy, and they are ours." Perry's victory cleared Lake Erie and allowed the Americans to march into Upper Canada. At the Battle of the Thames, they killed Tecumseh, the last Indian leader who would seriously threaten American expansion. 1814 was the year the Empire struck back. Napoleon, temporarily vanquished, was confined to the tiny island of Elba, which allowed Britain to double its troop strength in North America. Fighting raged on the Canadian frontier, where neither side was able to break through. The British made a second push in the Chesapeake. In August, 4,500 troops landed in Maryland, only 35 miles from Washington. Secretary Armstrong thought they were bound for Baltimore. "No, no," he said, "Baltimore is the place, sir. What the devil would they do here?" But before the British reached Baltimore, they made a left turn at Bladensburg, Maryland. The 63-year-old president, who had never heard a shot fired in anger, borrowed a horse and a pistol and rode out to the battlefield with his cabinet. The Americans were routed, and the British marched to Washington, where they burned the Capitol, ate dinner in the White House, then burned that too. In 3 weeks they moved on to Baltimore, but this city was well fortified. Francis Scott Key, an American lawyer negotiating a prisoner exchange, watched the attack from a British ship. When it failed, he wrote a patriotic poem and set it to an old drinking song. The government, meanwhile, had moved back to Washington. Since the White House was a ruin, Madison lived in the Octagon House, still standing on New York Avenue. In January 1815, the British made their third and potentially most dangerous push on New Orleans. New Orleans controlled the Mississippi River, which controlled the economy of half the country. "If the British succeed," wrote Federalist Timothy Pickering, "I shall consider the Union as severed." The city was defended by General Andrew Jackson, who made good use of entrenchments and artillery. Winston Churchill called the final British attack, a frontal assault on an embankment without scaling ladders, one of the most unintelligent maneuvers in the history of British warfare. In half an hour, the British lost 2,000 men killed and wounded, the Americans only 70. The Treaty of Ghent, which ended the war, had actually been signed 2 weeks before the Battle of New Orleans, but slow communication meant that no one in America learned of it for a month and a half. The treaty was a draw. The British abandoned their Indian allies, but conceded nothing on impressment or orders in council. The borders of the United States and Canada stayed exactly where they were. Was it all a waste then? Not quite. America had taken on the country that beat Napoleon and managed to beat them a few times. During the Vietnam War, Senator George Aiken supposedly said the United States should declare victory and pull out. At the end of the War of 1812, both sides pulled out, and America declared victory.
On the shore dimly seen, through the mist of the deep, where the foe's haughty host in dread silence reposes, what is that which the breeze o'er the towering steep, as it fitfully blows, half conceals, half discloses? Now it catches the gleam of the morning's first beam, in full glory reflected, now shines in the stream. 'Tis the star-spangled banner, oh long may it wave, o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. 'Tis the star-spangled banner, oh long may it wave, o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.